The emergency signal cut through space like a knife through silk. Ambassador Veltar stood before the great communication array on Serenity Prime, his blue-tinted hands shaking as he adjusted the transmission frequency one more time. The massive, crystal towers around him hummed with power, sending his voice across the galaxy to any species that might listen. "This is Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Council." His voice carried the weight of desperation that no amount of diplomatic training could hide. "Our people face complete destruction. The Korthak Empire has already taken 12 of our outer colonies. Their ships destroy everything in their path. We have no weapons that can stop them. Please, any civilization that receives this message, we beg for your help." The signal traveled through the void, bouncing off relay stations and passing through the networks that connected hundreds of worlds. On each planet that received it, the response was the same. Leaders would listen, discuss the matter in their councils, and then send back polite refusals. The Altarians were the first to respond. Their message was formal and cold. "The Altarian Republic acknowledges your request for military assistance. However, our laws prevent us from interfering in conflicts between other species. We wish you success in finding a peaceful solution." High Counselor Zeth Ara read the message aloud to the emergency session of the Zephyrian Council. Her voice was steady, but her golden eyes showed the fear they all felt. "So they offer us nothing but good wishes," she said. "Perhaps the Nexari will help," suggested Defense Minister Kixion. "They have powerful ships." The Nexari response came 6 hours later. The crystalline beings expressed their sympathy, but claimed they were already committed to defending their own space against pirates. They could spare some medical supplies, nothing more. One by one, the replies came in. The aquatic thalassans offered to treat wounded refugees but would not send warships. The insect-like Vorthak said they were too far away to help. The energy beings called the Luminary claimed they did not understand physical warfare. Each message followed the same pattern: sympathy, regret, and then excuses. On the bridge of the human exploration vessel UES Ranger, Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing star charts when the communication officer called out, "Captain, we're picking up an emergency transmission. It's on multiple frequencies." "Put it through, Lisa," Morrison said. Communications Officer Lisa Park nodded and activated the speakers. The desperate voice of Ambassador Veltar filled the bridge. Morrison listened to the entire message without speaking. When it ended, he looked around at his crew. Chief Engineer Ryan Cross was frowning at his console. Medical Officer Amy Stone had stopped her work to listen. Tactical Officer Ben Taylor was already pulling up star charts. "Sir, should we respond?" Park asked. Morrison stood up from his captain's chair. He was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much of the galaxy's darker corners. "Yes, we respond. But first, get me a direct line to Earth Defense Command." The transmission to Earth took several minutes to reach its destination. Admiral Elena Vasquez was in her office at the Lunar Command Station when the message arrived. She was a woman who had worked her way up through the ranks during humanity's early expansion into space. She understood that the galaxy was not always a friendly place. Morrison's face appeared on her screen. "Admiral, we've received a distress call from a species called the Zephyrians. They're being wiped out by something called the Korthak Empire. They've asked everyone for help, but it sounds like nobody is willing to fight." Vasquez leaned forward. "What's the tactical situation?" "Unknown, ma'am. But these Zephyrians sound like they can't defend themselves. The Korthaks have taken 12 colonies already and are still advancing. Any strategic value to us?" Morrison shook his head. "None that I can see. They're just asking for help because they're dying." Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. On Earth, that was usually enough reason to act. "Send me everything you have on this situation. I'll take it to the Defense Council." The Defense Council met in an underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was filled with men and women who had spent their careers preparing for threats that might come from space. General Rick Stone commanded the Marines. Admiral Kate Sullivan led the Navy. Colonel Marcus Webb ran Special Operations. Vasquez presented the information Morrison had gathered. The Zephyrians were a peaceful species with advanced technology, but almost no military capability. The Korthak Empire was expanding aggressively, taking worlds through overwhelming force. Other galactic powers had refused to help. "So why should we care?" asked General Stone. He was not being cruel, just practical. "We're new out here. We don't owe these people anything." Admiral Sullivan looked up from the data pad she had been reading. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because if we don't stop this Korthak Empire now, they might come for us later." Colonel Webb nodded. "Plus, this gives us a chance to see what we're really dealing with out here. Better to find out now than when they're attacking Earth." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would respond to the Zephyrian plea for help. Ambassador Veltar was in his private chambers when the new message arrived. He had spent the day reading rejection after rejection from species across the galaxy. His people were losing hope. The Korthak fleet was only days away from the next colony world. The communication officer's voice was excited when she called him. "Ambassador, we have a new response to your message. It's from a species called humans." Veltar had never heard of humans. He called up the galactic database and searched for information. What he found made him pause. Earth was listed as a Class 12 death world. The entry was brief and clinical, noting that the planet had produced a species with unusual survival characteristics. The human message was different from all the others. Instead of a diplomatic recording, it was a live transmission. A human female in military uniform appeared on his screen. She had short, dark hair and serious eyes. "Ambassador Veltar, this is Admiral Elena Vasquez of Earth Defense Command. We received your message about the Korthak attack on your people. We are prepared to offer military assistance." Veltar felt his heart racing. Finally, someone was offering real help. "Admiral, thank you. What kind of assistance can you provide? We're assembling a fleet now. Our ships will be in your space within 2 weeks. We'll need detailed information about Korthak capabilities and your defensive positions." "Of course, anything you need. But Admiral, I must ask, what do you want in return?" The human looked confused by the question. "In return? You asked for help. People are dying. That's enough reason for us." After the transmission ended, Veltar sat in his chamber trying to understand what he had just heard. Every other species had wanted something in exchange for their aid. Trade agreements, territorial concessions, technology transfers. The humans had not mentioned any payment at all. He called up the information about Earth again. Class 12 Death World. The highest classification in the database. A planet so dangerous that most species could not even visit it safely. And somehow, the beings from that nightmare world were the only ones willing to help. High Counselor Zethara called an emergency meeting when she heard about the human response. The council chamber was filled with worried voices as the Zephyrian leaders discussed this unexpected development. "What do we know about these humans?" asked Defense Minister Kixion. "Very little," Veltar admitted. "They come from a world that our database classifies as extremely dangerous, but they seem willing to fight for us when no one else will." "Death world species," whispered one of the counselors. "What have we brought upon ourselves?" Zethara stood up. Her voice carried the authority of her office. "We have brought ourselves hope. For the first time since this crisis began, someone is offering to fight beside us. Whatever these humans are, they cannot be worse than watching our people die while the galaxy turns away." In space above Earth, ships were already beginning to gather. The human fleet would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. 2 weeks after Admiral Vasquez made her promise, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian territory. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as her ships took formation around the flagship. She had brought 12 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and 2 carrier vessels loaded with fighters and marines. "Contact the Zephyrian homeworld," Sullivan ordered. "Tell them we're here." On Serenity Prime, Ambassador Veltar was in the Orbital Defense Center when the human ships appeared on the sensors. The Zephyrian technicians stared at their screens in confusion. The human vessels looked nothing like the elegant, curved ships that most galactic species preferred. These were angular, brutal-looking machines covered in weapon ports and armor plating. "Ambassador," called sensor operator Nixel, The human ships are requesting permission to approach the planet. Granted immediately, Veltar replied. He had been waiting for this moment with a mixture of hope and fear. The Korthak advance fleet was only 3 days away from the outer colonies. Time was running out. High Counselor Zethara and Defense. Minister Kixion joined Veltar in the Defense Center as the human flagship entered orbit. Through the viewing ports, they could see the massive gray vessel hanging in space like a sleeping predator. It was twice the size of their largest ship, and looked like it had been built for one purpose only: war. "They want to meet with our leadership immediately," reported Communications Officer Lisara. "Admiral Sullivan is requesting permission to come aboard our station." "Tell them yes," Zethara said, "and prepare the main conference room. It seems our saviors have arrived." An hour later, Admiral Sullivan materialized in the transport chamber along with 4 other humans. Veltar had expected beings who looked exotic and alien, but the humans appeared surprisingly ordinary. Admiral Sullivan was a middle-aged woman with gray streaks in her brown hair and intelligent eyes. She wore a dark blue uniform with rank insignia that spoke of long service. With her came Colonel Marcus Webb, a tall man with scars on his hands that suggested he had seen combat. Dr. Nina Rodriguez carried a medical scanner and looked around the station with obvious curiosity. Major Sophie Grant had the bearing of a professional soldier, alert and ready for anything. Lieutenant Commander Alex Chen carried a data pad and was already taking notes about Zephyrian technology. "Ambassador Veltar," Admiral Sullivan said, extending her hand in what the Zephyrians had learned was a human greeting. "Thank you for allowing us to help." Veltar took the offered hand carefully. Human grip was much stronger than he had expected. "Admiral, we are grateful beyond words, but I must warn you, the Korthak Empire has never been defeated. They have conquered 47 worlds in the last 10 years. Sullivan nodded. "We've studied the intelligence reports you sent us. Colonel Webb has some questions about their tactics." Colonel Webb stepped forward. "Ambassador, our analysis shows that the Korthak rely on overwhelming firepower and intimidation. They attack with massive fleets and demand surrender before engaging. Most species give up rather than fight." "Yes," Veltar agreed. "That is exactly their method. Few civilizations are willing to accept the casualties that would come from resisting them." The humans exchanged glances. Major Grant spoke up. "What kind of casualties are we talking about?" Defense Minister Kixion answered. "In the few battles where species have tried to fight back, the Korthak have destroyed entire fleets, sometimes 20 or 30 ships lost for every enemy vessel damaged." Dr. Rodriguez looked shocked. "Your people have no military training at all?" "We have defense fleets," Kixion said defensively. "But we are explorers and scientists, not warriors. Our ships are built for research and peaceful contact, not for battle." Lieutenant Commander Chen looked up from his data pad. "With respect, Minister, your ships have almost no armor and weapons that were designed for asteroid mining, not combat. The Korthak vessels are purpose-built warships." Admiral Sullivan studied the tactical displays that the Zephyrians had provided. "Show me their standard attack pattern." For the next 2 hours, the Zephyrians explained how the Korthak Empire operated. Their fleets would arrive at a target system and immediately demand surrender. If the local government refused, they would begin systematic bombardment of military targets. When resistance collapsed, they would move to civilian population centers. Most species surrendered long before it reached that point. They use fear as their primary weapon, Veltar explained. "The threat of complete destruction makes most civilizations submit rather than fight." Colonel Webb was making notes on his tablet. "Have they ever faced sustained resistance? Someone who fought back for weeks or months instead of days?" "No," Zethara admitted. "Most battles end within hours once the enemy realizes the cost of fighting." Major Grant leaned forward. "What happens to species that do surrender?" "They become part of the Korthak Empire," Kixion said bitterly. "Their resources are taken, their populations relocated as needed. They survive, but they are no longer free." Dr. Rodriguez had been scanning the Zephyrians with her medical equipment throughout the meeting. "Admiral, I'm detecting some interesting physiological differences. The Zephyrians have much lower stress tolerance than humans. Their bodies literally cannot handle the kind of sustained combat pressure that we consider normal. What does that mean? Veltar asked. It means your people are not built for war, Sullivan explained gently. Your nervous system shut down, under extreme stress. That's probably why most galactic species avoid prolonged conflicts. Lieutenant Commander Chen pulled up a holographic display showing human military history. On Earth, we have been fighting wars for thousands of years. Our bodies and minds adapted to handle combat stress. We can function normally in situations that would paralyze most other species. The Zephyrians stared at the display showing human battle statistics. The numbers were staggering. Conflicts that lasted for years. Battles with casualty rates that would have ended any galactic war within hours. Soldiers who fought effectively even when wounded or exhausted. This is why no one else would help us, Zathara realized. They cannot fight the way the Korthak do. But you can, Veltar said, looking at the humans with new understanding. Admiral Sullivan nodded. Colonel Webb, show them the battle plan. Webb activated a three-dimensional tactical display. The Korthak expect to arrive, make their demands, and receive surrender within a day or two. Instead, we're going to give them a real fight. Our ships will engage them directly while your vessels provide support from long range. Major Grant pointed to specific locations on the display. We've identified their command ship patterns. Human, Marines will board and capture their flagship while the fleet keeps them busy. Dr. Rodriguez added, we've also prepared medical stations to handle both human and Zephyrian wounded. Our field hospitals are designed to operate under combat conditions. Defense. Minister Kixion looked confused. You plan to fight them ship to ship in close combat? That's the only way to win, Sullivan said simply. You can't defeat an enemy by trying to avoid them. You have to be willing to take casualties to inflict casualties. Veltar felt a chill run through his body. These humans spoke of death and injury the way his people discussed weather patterns. It was simply part of their calculations, not something to be feared or avoided at all costs. Admiral, he said carefully, are you certain your people can do this? The Korthak have never lost a major battle. Sullivan smiled, and for the first time, Veltar saw something dangerous in her expression. Ambassador, the Korthak have never fought humans before. They're about to learn what happens when you threaten someone under our protection. Lieutenant Commander Chen closed his datapad. We'll need complete integration of our command systems with your defense networks. Colonel Webb will establish joint operation centers on your major worlds. Dr. Rodriguez will set up medical facilities for both species. And Major Grant will begin training your defense forces in basic combat tactics, Sullivan added. They won't become warriors overnight, but they can learn to support human operations effectively. The meeting continued for several more hours as the humans outlined their preparations. The Zephyrians listened with growing amazement as these beings from a death world casually discussed strategies that involved accepting losses, fighting while wounded, and continuing operations even after major setbacks. When the humans finally returned to their ship, Veltar stood with his fellow leaders watching the transport disappear. What have we done? Whispered one of the counselors. High Counselor Zathara turned from the viewing port. We have allied ourselves with predators to defeat predators. May the ancestors help us all. In space above them, the human fleet was already moving into defensive positions. The Korthak advance force was less than 2 days away, and for the first time in galactic history, they were going to meet an enemy that wanted to fight. The Korthak advance fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly where human intelligence had predicted. Commander Zextar of the Korthak Third Fleet looked at his tactical display with satisfaction. 12 enemy vessels waited in formation around the colony world of Haven's Edge. It would be another easy victory. Begin standard intimidation protocol, Zextar ordered. His communications officer opened a channel to the defenders. Defenders of Haven's Edge, this is Commander Zextar of the Korthak Empire. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. Comply and your population will be relocated safely. Resist, and we will destroy every ship and orbital facility in this system. The response came immediately, but it was not what Zextar expected. A human voice answered him. This is Captain Tyler Brooks of the UES Wolverine. Commander, you have 1 minute to turn your ships around and leave this system. This is your only warning." Zextar laughed. In 10 years of conquest, no one had ever spoken to him like that. What species dares to threaten the Korthak Empire? "We're humans," Brooks replied, "and you're about to find out why that matters." "Commander." Zextar had never heard of humans, but it did not matter. His fleet of 18 heavy cruisers could crush any opposition. "Begin the attack. Destroy them all." Captain Brooks watched the Korthak ships advance on his tactical display. His small fleet consisted of 4 human destroyers and 8 Zephyrian defense vessels. By any normal calculation, they should have run or surrendered immediately. "All ships execute Alpha Protocol," Brooks ordered. "Show them what Earth taught us about fighting." The human ships accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet. Behind them, the Zephyrian vessels followed, their crews terrified but determined to support their new allies. Lieutenant Sarah Kim at the weapons station watched as the range closed rapidly. "Captain, they're not firing yet. I think they expect us to break off. Then they don't know humans very well," Brooks said. "All weapons, target their lead ship. Let's introduce ourselves properly." The first exchange of fire shocked both sides. The Korthak energy beams were powerful and accurate, designed to disable enemy ships quickly. But the human vessels kept coming even as their armor plating melted and their hull sections buckled. Captain Diana Lopez aboard the UES Falcon took a direct hit that destroyed her forward weapons array. Instead of retreating, she ordered her ship to ram speed and launched every missile she had remaining. "Lopez, pull back," Brooks ordered over the communication channel. "Your ship is badly damaged." "Negative, Captain. We've still got engines and attitude control. That's enough to complete the mission." The Falcon slammed into the Korthak heavy cruiser at full velocity. Both ships exploded in a ball of superheated plasma, but not before Lopez's crew escaped in the life pods. Commander Zextar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The enemy ship had deliberately destroyed itself to take out one of his vessels. No civilized species fought that way. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the enemy is not following standard engagement protocols. They're attacking at point-blank range and accepting catastrophic damage to their own ships." "Continue firing," Zextar ordered. "They cannot sustain these losses." But the humans could sustain them, and they did. Captain Ben Carter's ship, the UES Thunder, lost its main engines but continued fighting with maneuvering thrusters. When his weapons ran out of ammunition, he ordered his crew to prepare for boarding action. "Boarding action?" his first officer asked. "Sir, we can barely maneuver." "Then we'll board them," Carter said. "Prepare the assault shuttles." Sergeant Maya Henderson led 12 human Marines in 3 small shuttles toward the nearest Korthak ship. The enemy vessel was still focused on the main battle and did not notice the tiny craft approaching its docking bays. The Korthak had never experienced a boarding attack. Their battles always ended before ships got close enough for that kind of fighting. When the Marines breached their hull, the crew panicked completely. Henderson and her squad moved through the ship like a force of nature. The Korthak soldiers had advanced weapons and protective armor, but they had never trained for close-quarters combat with an enemy that fought harder when cornered. "Clear the corridor," Henderson shouted as her Marines advanced. The Korthak fled. Before them, unable to understand how these small beings could be so aggressive and effective in confined spaces. Within 20 minutes, the Marines had captured the ship's bridge. Henderson personally dragged the Korthak captain from his command chair and secured the vessel for human forces. Captain Brooks received the report with grim satisfaction. "Outstanding work, Sergeant. Can you get their engines running?" "Already on it, sir. Chief Petty Officer Jake Wilson is down in their engine room now. Should have power restored in 10 minutes. The battle continued for 3 hours. By the end, 6 human ships had been destroyed or severely damaged, but 9 Korthak vessels were either captured or destroyed. Most importantly, the enemy advance had been completely stopped. Commander Zextar found himself a prisoner aboard his own flagship. After human Marines stormed the bridge, he stared at the human commander who had captured him, trying to understand what had happened. "Your species fights like wild animals," he said in accented galactic standard. "No civilized beings would accept such losses for a minor colony world." "Captain," Brooks studied the Korthak commander. The alien was tall and thin, with pale green skin and large eyes that showed fear and confusion. "Commander, you made a mistake. You assumed we would fight like every other species you've conquered." "But the casualties," Zextar protested. "Half your fleet is destroyed. Your people died for strangers on a world you had never seen before. Today." "That's what humans do," Brooks said simply. "We protect those who cannot protect themselves, even if it costs us everything." Intelligence Officer Rachel Kim had been monitoring enemy communications throughout the battle. She approached Captain Brooks with a disturbed expression. "Sir, I've been listening to their fleet channels. The Korthak main force is only 12 hours behind this advance group. When they see what happened here, they're going to send everything. They have." Brooks nodded. He had expected this. "How many ships?" "Best estimate is over 100 heavy cruisers plus support vessels. They're bringing their entire sector fleet." Dr. Sam Mitchell, who had been treating wounded from both sides in the makeshift medical bay, joined the conversation. "Captain, I've learned something interesting from examining Korthak prisoners. Their stress response is similar to the Zephyrians. They're not built for sustained combat either." "What do you mean?" "I mean they win through intimidation because they can't handle real warfare any better than their victims can. This advance force broke and ran as soon as we showed we wouldn't quit fighting." Captain Brooks considered this information. The implications were significant. If the Korthak Empire had built their entire military doctrine around enemies that would surrender quickly, they might not be prepared for opponents who treated long battles as normal. "Kim, get me Admiral Sullivan. Tell her we need the full fleet here immediately. And send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're going to need reinforcements." "Sir," Kim said. "Earth is weeks away. The main Korthak fleet will be here tomorrow." "Then, we hold them here until help arrives," Brooks said, "however long that takes." On the captured Korthak flagship, Major Julie Davis was examining the enemy computer systems with a team of technicians. What she found disturbed her greatly. "Captain, you need to see this. The Korthak have detailed files on every species in this sector. They know exactly how much pressure each civilization can take before surrendering." Brooks studied the alien data. The Korthak had precise calculations for every species they had conquered. How long each would fight before giving up. What level of casualties would break their morale. Which threats would make them surrender without fighting at all. "There's no entry for humans," Davis pointed out. "Because they've never fought us before," Brooks realized. "Their entire strategy is based on enemies that quit when the fighting gets hard." Lieutenant Commander Alex Chen had been coordinating with the Zephyrian survivors. He approached with a worried expression. "Sir, the Zephyrian Defense Coordinator is requesting permission to evacuate their remaining ships. They're saying the casualties we've taken prove this battle cannot be won." Brooks looked out at the debris field where brave humans had died fighting for people they had never met. "Tell the Zephyrians they're free to leave if they want. But we're staying. Someone has to show this Korthak Empire that there are still people in the galaxy who will fight back." In the distance, space began to shimmer as more ships prepared to drop out of hyperspace. The real battle was about to begin, and for the first time in their history, the Korthak Empire was going to face an enemy that refused to surrender. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of the first reports reaching civilization centers across the galaxy. Ambassador Claire Phillips sat at the newly installed Earth delegation table, watching as representatives from dozens of species filed into the Great Chamber on Nexus Station. The Altarian delegate was the first to speak. His voice carried the formal tone that his species used for official complaints. The human delegation must explain the excessive violence used in the Haven's Edge engagement. 6 ships were completely destroyed in a battle that should have ended with negotiated surrender. Philip stood up slowly. She was a career diplomat who had spent years learning how to deal with alien cultures, but today she felt the weight of representing her entire species. "Delegate Mortax, the Korthak Empire attacked a peaceful colony. We defended it by ramming your ships into theirs," the Nexari representative added, his crystalline voice ringing through the chamber. "No civilized species uses suicide attacks as standard military tactics. We prefer to call it sacrifice," Phillips replied. "Captain Lopez and her crew saved thousands of Zephyrian lives by stopping that Korthak cruiser." High Counselor Velneth of the Thalassan Republic raised a webbed hand. Ambassador Phillips, your species' methods are disturbing to most galactic civilizations. This level of violence has not been seen in our space for centuries. Phillips looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. Most of them appeared genuinely confused and frightened by human military actions. They had lived in a galaxy where wars ended quickly and casualties were minimized through early surrender. Council members, she said, I think you need to understand something about humans. We evolved on a world where everything tried to kill us. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, extreme weather. We learned that sometimes you have to fight to survive, even when the odds are against you. The Vorthak delegate clicked his mandibles in what Phillips had learned was their equivalent of disagreement. But the casualties you accept are enormous. Half your fleet was destroyed for one minor world. Haven's Edge isn't minor to the people who live there, Phillips said firmly. Every world matters. Every life matters, that's why we fight. Dr. Zenmari, the Luminari representative, spoke in their characteristic whisper. We have studied your species' history, Ambassador Phillips. Your people have been at war with each other for thousands of years. Is this aggression truly necessary now that you have reached space? Phillips was quiet for a moment. This was the question she had been dreading. Dr. Zenmari, we didn't fight each other because we wanted to. We fought because we had to learn how to survive. Those same survival skills are what make us effective against the Korthak Empire. Meanwhile, in the Haven's Edge system, Admiral Frank Torres was preparing for the largest space battle in galactic history. His reinforcement fleet had arrived, just hours before the main Korthak armada dropped out of hyperspace. The human force now consisted of 37 ships facing over 100 Korthak vessels. Warlord Thexmore commanded the Korthak fleet from his massive flagship, the Conquest of Worlds. He studied the tactical display showing the human formation with growing anger. The destruction of his advance force was an insult that could not be tolerated. Communications, open a channel to the enemy fleet, Thexmore ordered. He was a veteran of 50 conquests and had never seen a species that refused to surrender when properly threatened. Admiral Torres accepted the incoming transmission on the bridge of the UES Relentless. The Korthak warlord appeared on his screen, an imposing figure in ornate battle armor. Human Commander, I am Warlord Thexmore. Your advanced ships destroyed vessels under my command. You will surrender immediately and submit your people for judgment, or I will destroy every human ship in this system. Torres looked at the alien commander with calm eyes. Warlord, I'm Admiral Frank Torres of the Earth Defense Force. You attacked our allies. We defended them. If you want to continue this fight, we're ready. You face 112 warships with fewer than 40, Thexmore said. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. We'll take our chances, Torres replied, and closed the channel. Thexmore stared at the blank screen in disbelief. No species had ever refused surrender when facing such overwhelming odds. He turned to his tactical officer. Begin the attack. Destroy them all. The battle began at maximum weapons range with the Korthak fleet advancing in their traditional overwhelming formation. They expected the human ships to break and run when they saw the size of the enemy force. Instead, the humans did something unexpected. They split into small groups and attacked from multiple directions at once. Admiral Torres had studied every major battle in human history and chosen tactics that had worked against numerically superior enemies for thousands of years. Captain Gary Foster led a squadron of destroyers in a high-speed attack on the enemy flanks. His ships moved faster and more aggressively than anything the Korthak had seen before, hitting hard and then disappearing before the enemy could respond effectively. Commander Janet Ross coordinated the main battle line, keeping the bulk of the human fleet in constant motion to avoid the Korthak's concentrated firepower. Her ships worked together with a coordination that amazed enemy observers. But the real shock came when the Korthak deployed their most feared weapon. Biological warfare had been banned in galactic conflicts for centuries, but the Korthak had never signed those agreements. They released engineered viruses designed to kill any organic crew within hours. The Korthak expected the human fleet to withdraw immediately when their ships were infected. Instead, something extraordinary happened. Major Julie Davis and her medical team aboard the UES Defiant worked frantically as the biological agents spread through their ship's air system. But instead of dying, the human crew began adapting to the toxin. Admiral, Davis reported over the fleet communication channel. The Korthak bioweapon is based on a protein structure similar to diseases we encountered on Earth. Our immune systems are fighting it off. Dr. Nina Rodriguez, now serving as fleet medical coordinator, was monitoring the situation across all human ships. Sir, 70% of our people are showing natural resistance to their biological attack. The rest are responding to standard medical treatment. Admiral Torres felt a cold satisfaction as he realized what this meant. All ships, continue the attack. Medical teams prepare countermeasures for our Zephyrian allies. Within 6 hours, Dr. Rodriguez had developed a treatment that protected Zephyrian crew members from the Korthak bioweapon. The human medical teams worked with an efficiency that the enemy had never seen before, treating their own wounded while simultaneously protecting their allies. Warlord Thexmore watched his tactical display with growing panic. His bioweapons had failed. His superior numbers were not producing the quick victory he had expected. Worst of all, the human ships kept fighting even when severely damaged. Captain Peter Young's ship, the UES Thunderbolt, had lost main engines, weapons control, and half its crew. Instead of surrendering, Young ordered his remaining people to prepare for boarding operations against the nearest enemy vessel. Young, your ship is finished, Admiral Torres called over the communication system. Pull back and evacuate your crew. Negative, Admiral. We've still got attitude thrusters and a full Marine complement. That's enough to take at least one more enemy ship with us. The Thunderbolt limped toward the Korthak heavy cruiser, its hull breached in dozens of places but its crew still fighting. When the two ships collided, Captain Young personally led the boarding party that captured the enemy vessel. Colonel Andy Sullivan was coordinating Marine operations across the fleet. His boarding parties had captured 12 Korthak ships by fighting through their corridors with a ferocity that the enemy could not match. Admiral, the Korthak ground troops are not trained for ship-to-ship combat, Sullivan reported. They panic when we get close enough to fight hand-to-hand. The revelation that the Korthak Empire was vulnerable to close combat spread through the human fleet quickly. Ships began deliberately ramming or boarding enemy vessels instead of fighting at long range. Commander Linda Hayes led a squadron of damaged human ships in the most desperate attack of the battle. Her vessels were too badly hurt to maneuver effectively, so she ordered them to form a defensive wall around the Zephyrian hospital ships. All vessels, this is Hayes. We hold this position no matter what. Those medical ships are not getting touched. The Korthak threw everything they had at the human defensive line. For 4 hours, the battle raged around the hospital ships as human crews fought with the determination of people protecting something more important than their own lives. When the smoke finally cleared, Commander Hayes' squadron had been destroyed, but the hospital ships remained safe. The Zephyrian medical crews aboard those vessels would never forget the sight of human ships burning in space around them, their crews having died to keep the wounded safe. Warlord Thexmore finally understood what he was fighting. These humans did not calculate victory and defeat the way other species did. They measured success by how well they protected others, not by how much they preserved themselves. Communications, he ordered in a voice that shook with fear. Contact the High Command. Tell them we need immediate reinforcements. 3 months after the Battle of Haven's Edge, Admiral Karen Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance as the largest human fleet ever assembled prepared to drop out of hyperspace. Behind her, flagships stretched a formation of over 200 warships carrying the combined might of Earth's military forces. The target was Korthak Prime, the capital world of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Intelligence reports confirmed that Warlord Thexmore had gathered every available ship to defend his homeworld. The final battle would determine whether the Korthak Empire survived or fell. Admiral, reported Communications Officer Lisa Park, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian fleet. High Counselor Zethara sends her regards and confirms their ships are ready to support our attack. Mitchell nodded. The Zephyrians had changed dramatically since first contact with humanity. Working alongside human advisors, they had learned to modify their peaceful exploration vessels into effective support craft. They would never be warriors like humans, but they had found ways to contribute to the fight. What about our other allies? Mitchell asked. The Altarian Republic has provided medical supplies and communications equipment, Park replied. The Nexari sent technical specialists to help with ship repairs. Even the Thalassans contributed food and medical supplies for our wounded. It was not the military alliance that humanity had hoped for, but it was something. The peaceful species of the galaxy were finally beginning to understand that someone had to stand against tyranny, even if they could not fight themselves. On Korthak Prime, Warlord Thexmore paced the command center of his orbital fortress. The reports from the outer systems painted a picture of complete disaster. Human forces had swept through Korthak space like a plague, capturing world after world with tactics that his military commanders could not counter. Warlord, his intelligence officer reported, the human fleet has arrived at the system's edge. Our sensors count 237 enemy warships. Thexmore felt his blood turn cold. Even with every ship recalled to defend the homeworld, he commanded only 180 vessels. For the first time in his military career, he faced an enemy with superior numbers. Are you certain of the count? He asked. Yes, Warlord. And sir, long-range scans show that many of the human ships are new construction. They have been building warships at an incredible rate since the conflict began. That was the detail that truly frightened Thexmore. The Korthak Empire built ships, slowly, carefully, with an eye toward intimidating enemies rather than fighting sustained wars. The humans had mobilized their entire industrial capacity for war production in a matter of months. Admiral Mitchell gave the order to attack at dawn, ship time. The human fleet advanced in a formation that the Korthak had learned to fear. Small, fast squadrons spread across a wide front, making it impossible to concentrate fire effectively. Captain Danny Foster led the first wave of attackers. His destroyer squadron accelerated to maximum speed, weaving through the Korthak defensive fire, with a skill that came from months of combat experience. All ships target their orbital platforms first, Foster ordered. Clear the way for the main assault. The Korthak had built massive weapon platforms around their homeworld, designed to destroy any attacking fleet before it could reach the planet. But the platforms were fixed targets, and human ships excelled at hit-and-run attacks against stationary enemies. Commander Sharon Lopez brought her squadron in from the opposite direction, hitting the platforms from behind while they focused on Foster's ships. The coordinated attack destroyed 6 defensive stations in the first hour of battle. Colonel Andy Sullivan prepared his Marines for the most ambitious operation in human military history. Instead of boarding individual ships, they planned to capture the Korthak command fortress itself. Listen up, Sullivan addressed his troops over the communication system. This fortress controls their entire defense network. Take it, and we end this war today. The assault shuttles launched from human carriers while the main fleet kept the enemy ships busy. Sergeant Maya Henderson led the first boarding party through a breach in the fortress's outer hull. The Korthak defenders fought desperately, but they had never trained for the kind of close-quarters combat that humans had perfected over centuries of warfare. Henderson's Marines moved through the fortress like a force of nature, clearing corridor after corridor with ruthless efficiency. Major Julie Davis had spent weeks studying captured Korthak technology. She led a specialized team directly to the fortress's computer core, where they began the process of turning the enemy's own systems against them. Colonel, we're in their main computer, Davis reported. I can shut down their orbital defenses and disrupt their fleet communications. Do it, Sullivan ordered. As the Korthak defense network collapsed, Admiral Mitchell pressed home her advantage. The main human battle line advanced directly toward the enemy fleet, no longer concerned about the orbital platforms. Warlord Thexmore watched his tactical display with growing horror as his defensive positions fell one by one. The humans fought, with a coordination and determination that his forces could not match. Sir, his tactical officer reported, human Marines have breached the command fortress. They're fighting their way toward the central core. Evacuate all essential personnel, Thexmore ordered. Prepare my personal ship for departure. But there would be no escape. Captain Gary Foster had positioned his squadron to intercept any ships trying to flee the battle. When Thexmore's vessel attempted to leave the fortress, Foster was waiting. This is Captain Foster, to the Korthak command ship. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Thexmore stared at the human warship on his view screen. It was smaller than his flagship but carried enough weapons to tear his ship apart. More importantly, he knew that the human captain would not hesitate to fire. I am Warlord Thexmore, Supreme Commander of the Korthak military, he said over the communication channel. I demand to be treated according to the rules of civilized warfare. You'll be treated fairly, Foster replied. But first you're going to order all Korthak forces to stand down. This war ends now. The formal surrender came 6 hours later. Warlord Thexmore, standing in chains aboard Admiral Mitchell's flagship, issued the order that ended the Korthak Empire's reign of terror. To all Korthak military commanders, his voice carried defeat and exhaustion. This is Warlord Thexmore. I order the immediate cessation of all hostile actions against human and allied forces. Surrender your ships and prepare for occupation by joint human galactic peacekeeping forces. Representative Peter Young addressed the Galactic Council 3 days after the fall of Korthak Prime. The same chamber that had criticized human methods now listened with respectful attention. Council members, Young said, the threat that terrorized this galaxy for decades has been eliminated. The Korthak Empire will be dissolved, and their former territories will be placed under galactic protection until new governments can be established. Altarian delegate spoke first. Ambassador Young, the human military methods remain disturbing to many species. What assurance do we have that Earth will not become the next conquering empire? Young looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. The same assurance we gave the Zephyrians when they first asked for our help. We fight to protect others, not to conquer them. The proof is in our actions. Ambassador Linda Hayes, now serving as Earth's permanent representative to the Galactic Council, stood beside Young. The joint Human-Zephyrian Alliance will establish peacekeeping stations throughout former Korthak space. Any species that threatens peaceful civilizations will face the same response that the Korthak received. 6 months later, Ambassador Veltar stood in his office on Serenity Prime looking out at the construction ships building the new joint defense station. Human and Zephyrian crews worked together, combining human military expertise with Zephyrian advanced technology. High Counselor Zethara joined him at the window. Do you ever regret sending that first message? She asked. Veltar considered the question carefully. The humans had indeed ended the Korthak threat, but they had also changed the galaxy forever. The age of peaceful surrender and limited warfare was over. Now everyone knew that some species would fight to the death rather than submit to tyranny. No, he said finally. We asked for help, and they came. They kept their promise even when it cost them dearly. That is the kind of ally our people can trust. In the distance, a human patrol ship passed by the station. Its crew included both humans and Zephyrians, working together to protect the peaceful worlds of the galaxy. The emergency signal that Ambassador Veltar had sent in desperation had reached across space to find the one species willing to fight for strangers. The plea for aid had been answered by Deathworlders, and the galaxy would never be the same. Sometimes salvation came not from those who shared your peaceful nature, but from those who possessed the strength to defend it. The humans had proven that some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant accepting losses that would terrify any other species. The Korthak Empire was gone, destroyed by beings who treated war as a natural extension of survival, and in its place stood an alliance between the peaceful and the strong, ready to face whatever threats might emerge from the dark spaces between the stars.